I was sitting across from my CEO when I realized the meeting was already over. He hadn't looked up once. His phone rested flat on the table, screen glowing softly as his thumb moved in small, bored motions. Whatever he was scrolling mattered more than the man in front of him who had been there longer than most of the building itself. My name is Mark Reynolds. I was 56 that year, and I had spent just over 3 decades at North Star Systems, a defense-adjacent cybersecurity firm outside Denver. I helped build the infrastructure that kept government networks stable when things failed quietly at 3 in the morning. That day, none of that seemed relevant. Finally, he spoke. "Let's talk about streamlining." Not hello, not thanks for coming in. Just that. I nodded once and waited. He flipped open a thin folder, the kind HR uses when they already know how the conversation ends. His tone stayed light, rehearsed. He talked about agility, about modernization, about fresh perspectives. He smiled the way people do when they think kindness is a tone of voice instead of an action. When he finished, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I closed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood up. As I walked out, I noticed something small, a date printed on the corner of the termination paperwork. And beneath it, a reference number I hadn't seen in years. I didn't say anything. I just left. I didn't go home right away. There's a diner a few blocks from the office. Vinyl booths, old coffee mugs with chipped handles, the kind of place where nobody asks follow-up questions. I slid into my usual seat and ordered black coffee. The waitress, Helen, recognized me immediately. She'd been there forever. "Haven't seen you in a while," she said, setting the cup down. I nodded. "Yeah, been busy." She refilled the mug without another word. The place smelled like bacon grease and disinfectant. A radio played softly behind the counter. I watched steam rise from the cup and tried not to think about the silence I'd just walked through. Offices are loud until they aren't. When people stop talking all at once, it carries weight. North Star had been my entire adult life. I joined when the company operated out of a repurposed warehouse. We were small then. Careful. Everyone knew what they were responsible for, and everyone understood what failure meant. Over the years, the work grew quieter and more serious. Federal contracts, secure systems, long nights, missed holidays, the kind of work you don't talk about at dinner. I paid the check and drove home through familiar streets, the sun dropping behind the foothills. My house still smelled faintly like eucalyptus candles. I kept buying the same brand. Old habits are easier than new ones. On the kitchen table, I set the folder down and poured a drink. Not much, just enough to slow things down. Then I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in a long time. Inside was a thin envelope, yellowed at the edges, no label, just paper and memory. I sat down and slid the contents out slowly. The reference number on the termination form was the same one printed at the top of the document in my hands. I leaned back in the chair and stared at it for a long time. Then I put the phone face down and waited. I didn't open the document right away. I poured the drink, took one slow sip, and let the room settle. The refrigerator hummed. The house creaked the way it always did when the temperature dropped in the evening. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. The envelope had been sitting in that drawer for more than a decade. I knew exactly what it was without rereading the header. Some things don't fade with time. They just wait. Back when North Star was barely staying afloat, everyone was exhausted. Contracts were fragile, legal was understaffed, ownership structures changed every few months, and no one kept clean records because everyone assumed they'd sort it out later. That was the year I built the core framework. Not a feature, not a patch. The foundation everything else rested on. It happened the way most important work does, quietly. Late nights, half-finished meals, systems breaking in ways that didn't announce themselves. I fixed problems before they became incidents. That was my job. Around that time, an old friend gave me advice I didn't ask for. Evan Cole. We served together years earlier. He went to law school after getting out, focused on intellectual property. We met every so often for coffee. He listened more than he talked. One night, after I showed him a rough version of what I was building, he went quiet. Then he said, You should file this under your own name. I remember laughing. That's not how it works. He shrugged. It is if you don't assign it. I trusted the company back then. Trusted the people. Most of them were former military, mission-first types. Loyalty meant something. Evan didn't argue. He just explained the process. Provisional filing, temporary protection, no harm unless someone forgets to follow up. In chaos, he said, details get missed. They did. I filed it quietly and put the paperwork away. I assumed it would get transferred eventually. It never did. North Star stabilized. Then it grew. Then it changed. People who remembered the early days retired. New executives arrived with degrees and consultants. Systems multiplied. The foundation stayed the same. That foundation stayed mine. Sitting at my kitchen table years later, I flipped through the pages. Dates, numbers, language that hadn't aged at all. There it was, buried where no one ever looked. A clause tied to termination. Automatic. Clean. I checked the timestamp on the termination notice again. Still inside the window. I stood up, walked to the sink, and rinsed the glass. Habit. Order matters when your thoughts start lining up too neatly. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me. What I felt was clarity. I pulled my phone back over and scrolled until I found Evan's contact. I hadn't called him in months. It rang twice. Let me guess, he said. They finally did it. I told him what happened. He didn't interrupt. Do you still have the filing? He asked. Yes. And the clause? Yes. There was a pause on the line, not hesitation, calculation. Then you should move, he said. Tonight. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. Logged in. Everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. Forms untouched, language unchanged. The system didn't care about feelings or tenure, it only cared about timing. I filled in the fields carefully, double-checked each entry. When I reached the final page, I stopped. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once and went quiet. I rested my hand on the trackpad and didn't rush. Then I clicked submit. The confirmation appeared without ceremony. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence, letting the house hold the moment. I slept better than I expected, not deeply, just evenly. No replaying conversations, no rehearsing arguments that would never happen. When I woke up, the house felt quiet in a way that didn't press on my chest. Morning light came in through the kitchen window at an angle I recognized. I made eggs, real ones, cracked carefully into the pan. Coffee brewed while I stood there barefoot, listening to it finish. My phone buzzed once on the counter. A text from Daniel, one of the senior engineers. Hey Mark, random question. Do you know anything about patents? I didn't answer. I ate slowly, cleaned the plate, put it in the sink. Another message came through. Never mind. Legal's asking a lot of questions. Something weird came up, then nothing. That silence lasted almost an hour. When the calls started, they came in waves. Numbers I didn't recognize, voicemails I didn't open. I let the phone sit where it was and finished my coffee. The first voicemail I listened to was short. Mark, this is Alex from Corporate Legal. Please call me back as soon as you can. The second was longer, tighter. This is Susan Hale, General Counsel. We need to speak with you immediately regarding an ownership discrepancy. Ownership discrepancy. I let that one sit. The third voicemail made me pause before playing it. Mark, the voice said, older, steadier. It's Tom Walker. Tom founded North Star, retired Army, built the company from a 2-room office and a handshake. He hadn't called me directly in years. I just got briefed. We need to talk. Not like this. Call me. I set the phone down. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do. I drove in, not to fix anything, not to negotiate, just to see. The parking lot looked the same cars, same security gate. But the building felt different when I walked in. Conversation stopped too quickly. People avoided eye contact, then checked twice to make sure it was really me. The receptionist froze for a second when she saw me. Oh, hi Mark, she said. I thought you... I'm just grabbing my things, I said. She nodded too fast and waved me through. Upstairs, a group had gathered near the engineering bullpen. Daniel spotted me and walked over. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. "Legal's locked in a room. No one's explaining anything." "Paperwork," I said. "It catches up eventually." That's when the elevator opened behind us. The CEO stepped out. He looked like someone who hadn't slept, shirt wrinkled, hair not quite right. He saw me and stopped walking. "Mark," he said, forcing a smile. "Can we talk?" We went into his office. Glass walls, city view. Door closed gently, like everything else he did. He started carefully, words arranged to sound reasonable. "There's been some confusion," he said, "about intellectual property." "There hasn't," I replied. He offered me a seat. I stayed standing. "We value your contributions," he continued. "Maybe we move too fast. There could be a consulting role, advisory, equity discussions." He kept talking, each offer slightly better than the last. None of them addressed the problem in the room. Finally, he stopped. "What do you want?" he asked. I looked at the window for a moment, then back at him. "I want you to understand something," I said. "The system your company runs on, the one you sell, demonstrate, and promise, that belongs to me." He shook his head. "That's not possible." "It is," I said. "And it's already done." The color left his face slowly, like water draining from a sink. "But we have contracts," he said. "Obligations." I nodded. "Then you should have been more careful about who you let go." He sat down heavily. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I cleared out my desk, took a framed photo, a notebook, nothing else. As I walked out, my phone buzzed again. A calendar invite. Emergency executive review, 48 hours. I declined it, then I went home. I didn't respond to anything that day. No emails, no calls, no forwarded messages from people who suddenly remembered my number. Silence wasn't avoidance. It was alignment. I needed everything to settle into its proper shape before touching it. That evening, I laid the documents out on the dining table, not all of them, just the ones that mattered. Filing receipt, timestamp, confirmation notice. The system doesn't care who you are, only whether you followed the rules. I worked the way I always had, methodically. Step 1. Verify the reversion was recorded everywhere it needed to be. Federal database, internal registry, backup confirmation. Step 2. Notify counsel. Not to negotiate, to document. Step 3. Wait. People misunderstand waiting. They think it's hesitation. In reality, it's what lets the truth arrive without interference. The next morning, the waiting paid off. At 7:12 a.m., I received an email from Evan. "They've frozen all outbound demos. Government side flagged the ownership change. This is moving faster than I expected." I read it once and closed the laptop. By mid-morning, the situation had grown teeth. North Star had a demonstration scheduled downtown. Large room, glass walls, federal representatives. The kind of meeting you don't cancel unless the building is on fire. They tried to cancel it anyway. That didn't work. Government agencies don't appreciate surprises, but they tolerate them even less when money and security overlap. Ownership questions don't get smoothed over with apologies. They get verified. I heard about the demo through Daniel, then through someone in marketing, then through someone I didn't know at all. Every version of the story changed slightly. That told me everything I needed to know. Around noon, Tom Walker called again. "Mark," he said, skipping the opening. "This has gotten complicated." "It hasn't," I said. "It's just visible now." He exhaled slowly. "They're asking questions we can't answer." "I know." A pause. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm not planning," I said. "I'm observing." He didn't argue. Tom understood process. He always had. That afternoon, I pressed my suit and laid it over the chair. Not because I intended to make a speech, just because if I showed up, I would do it properly. I arrived 15 minutes early. The conference center was already buzzing. Security checks, lanyards, low conversation. Screens cycling through slides I recognized immediately. I took a seat in the back row. No announcement, no disruption. The CEO stepped to the podium. He looked worse than the day before, pale, focused in the way people get when they're hoping momentum will save them. He started the presentation. Clean delivery. Good pacing. He used all the right words. Then he pointed to the architecture diagram. Our proprietary system, he said, represents years of internal development. That was my cue. I stood up. Not quickly, not loudly, just enough to change the temperature in the room. "Excuse me," I said. Every head turned. I introduced myself, name only, former role, nothing extra. Then I held up my phone. The confirmation screen was plain, official, boring in the way only real authority is. As of Monday evening, I said, this patent reverted to its original holder. That would be me. No accusations, no tone, just information. The room went very still. I watched people do what serious professionals always do. They checked, they verified, they stopped listening to marketing language and started listening to data. The CEO tried to speak. It didn't land. A man from the front row stood up, documents already in hand. "We'll need to suspend this," he said, immediately. No one argued. They filed out quietly, one by one, like a decision had already been made somewhere above the room. I stayed seated until the space emptied. Then I stood, straightened my jacket, and walked out the same way I'd come in. Outside, the air felt lighter. My phone buzzed once, a message from Tom. "We need to talk." I looked at the sky for a moment. Then I replied, "Tomorrow." We met the next morning in a smaller room. No glass walls, no screens, just a table, a few chairs, and a coffee pot that had been left on too long. Tom was already there when I arrived. He stood up, shook my hand, and gestured for me to sit. The CEO came in last. He looked like someone who had finally accepted that speed wasn't going to help him. The confidence from earlier in the week was gone. What remained was careful attention. No one spoke at first. That was fine. Tom broke the silence. "Let's be clear about where we are, He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. "The patent reverted," he continued. "Federal agencies confirmed it last night. Demonstrations are suspended. Legal exposure is significant." The CEO nodded once. He kept his hands flat on the table. "We're not here to argue facts," he said. "We're here to understand terms." I appreciated that, not because it was generous, but because it was accurate. "I'm not here to debate ownership," I said. "That part's already resolved." He took a breath. "Then what are you here for?" I leaned back slightly and answered without raising my voice. "Order." That got his attention. "For years," I continued, "this company benefited from work it didn't fully account for, not maliciously at first, just carelessly. Over time, that carelessness became policy." No one interrupted. "I don't want an apology," I said, "and I don't want to be rehired under a different title so everyone can pretend this never happened." Tom watched the CEO closely now. "What do you want?" the CEO asked again. His voice was steadier this time. I had already written it down. Not because I needed notes, but because clarity improves outcomes. "First," I said, "a formal licensing agreement, upfront compensation, market-aligned, no delays." He nodded slowly. "Second," I continued, "ongoing royalties, transparent reporting, third-party audits." He wrote something down. "Third," I said, "a technical leadership role, real authority, not symbolic." Tom shifted in his chair. He understood what that meant. "And finally," I added, "a corrective measure, something that acknowledges the people who get overlooked when organizations grow too fast." The CEO looked up. "What kind of measure?" "A funded program," I said, "for veterans entering technical fields. Annual, no branding theater." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Tom spoke carefully. "That's a substantial list. It reflects the value in question," I replied. The CEO exhaled through his nose. "And my position?" I looked at him directly for the first time. "That's for the board to decide," I said, "but it can't be unchanged." He nodded once. No argument, just acceptance. The meeting didn't end with handshakes or raised voices. It ended with tasks, timelines, follow-ups, the way real things move forward. When I stood to leave, Tom walked me out. "You could have burned this down," he said quietly. "I didn't build it to do that," I replied. He held the door open. "We'll be in touch." I stepped outside and felt the sun on my face. Nothing dramatic. Just a normal morning continuing. My phone buzzed with a message from Evan. "Board's meeting this afternoon. They're not pushing back." I put the phone back in my pocket. Then I waited. The call came 2 days later, not rushed, not tense, just scheduled. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad I didn't really need. The window was open. Late afternoon air moved through the room, carrying the sound of someone mowing a lawn down the block. Tom spoke first. "The board voted this morning," he said. "Unanimous." I waited. "They accepted the framework," he continued. "Licensing, royalties, governance, the program you outlined. Legal is finalizing language now." I wrote the date at the top of the page. Habit. "And the leadership position?" I asked. "Chief Technology Officer," he said. "Direct reporting line to the board. Full authority over architecture and security." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. There was a pause. Then he added, "The CEO submitted his resignation last night." I didn't respond right away. "That wasn't a condition I set," I said finally. "I know," Tom replied, "but it was inevitable." That word again. Order. We reviewed numbers, timelines, implementation steps. Nothing emotional. Just alignment. When the call ended, I closed the notebook and stood up. For the first time in a long while, there was nothing urgent waiting for me. 2 weeks later, I walked back into the building. Same lobby, same elevator, different posture in the room. People nodded, some smiled, some just looked relieved. My office was ready, clean, simple, a larger desk by the window. I placed one framed photo on it and nothing else. Work resumed the way it always should have, quietly, carefully. Systems stabilized, demos restarted. Contracts resumed once ownership was verified and documented. The scholarship fund launched without a press release. Applications came in anyway. I spent my afternoons reviewing designs with younger engineers, not correcting them, asking questions, letting them think through problems instead of rushing to answers. At home, my evenings changed too. I cooked more, took my time cleaning up, finished small projects I'd been ignoring for years. The old car in the garage finally got the attention it deserved. Turns out patience works just as well with machines as it does with people. One night, while organizing a drawer, I found the empty envelope where the old filing had been. I folded it once and put it back. Some things aren't reminders, they're markers. I turned off the light and went to bed. Life didn't change overnight. That was the surprising part. Mornings stayed quiet. I still made my coffee the same way. Still stood by the window for a minute before starting the day. Control doesn't arrive loudly. It settles in when things stop pulling at you. At work, my calendar finally made sense. Fewer meetings, clearer decisions. When something broke, people came with facts instead of panic. That's all I ever wanted. In the evenings, I spent more time in the garage. The old car ran smoothly now. I'd wipe my hands on a rag and just stand there for a bit, listening to the engine cool. Order has a sound to it if you pay attention. Every so often, someone new would reach out. Quiet messages, short calls, people who'd been sidelined, underestimated, or dismissed too easily. I didn't promise anything. I just listened. Sometimes that's enough. One night, I put the phone face down, turned off the lights, and sat in the living room with nothing playing. No noise, no urgency, just space. That's when I knew it was finished. If you stayed with me through this, thanks for listening. If the story helped you slow down, even a little, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think. And if you're watching right now, tell me in the comments what city you're in and what time it is where you are. I like knowing where these stories land. 2 more stories will appear next. Take your time with them. I'll see you there.